But first, general announcement. At the end of this session, there will be a group photograph taken outside of the main entrance. So before you go for the lunch, go to the main lobby and go to the picture. Thank you. And now, Mr. Enrico Rochi will present a study of the impact of default setting on evacuation model results. A study of visibly condition versus occupant walking speeds.
Well, I'm Enrico Rochi, I'm from the Polytechnic University of Bari, Italy, and I'm currently visiting researcher at Lund University. And actually there I'm working on collecting data for studying the human behavior during tunnel evacuation. So here, let's see. Okay. Today I'm going to talk about the impact of default settings on evacuation model results. The genesis of this work comes from a talk I saw last year from Steve Wynn at Interplan, and it was discussing how to be the impact of the expertise of users about evacuation models. I mean, what they know about evacuation model default settings and what could be the impact on results. And due to the fact that I was studying experimental data on correlation about visibility condition and occupant walking speeds, we were deciding to test different models and see how these different models were tackling the same problem. So this work was done with 3 models, FDS evac. I'm quite lucky because here Tino with me, and Exodus, and this part of the work was done by Steve, and GridFlow, and Professor Pusa was working together with me with this model GridFlow. So here there is the structure of the paper I'm going to present, and it's the first part will be a quick introduction, then I will focus on the general discussion on default settings and embedded data. So I will just summarize what Steve Quinn and Erika Kuligowski were pointing in their talk at Intercom last year. And then I will show what are the current data sets available for studying visibility conditions versus optimal walking speed, the 2 main experimental data sets we have now. And then I will show a case study with these 3 models I was talking to you before. So, why I was doing this, we were doing this kind of study. The problem is that now we have great accessibility to this evacuation model. So the number of users is increasing. And why? Because we have always more user-friendly graphic user interface. For example, in Italy, in my country, they built a graphic user interface for evac in Italian. And from this, we got a huge number of users using that model. And also, we have models which are providing default settings for making the work of input configuration very easy and fast. But what's the problem? The problem is that we need to have expert users for using this kind of models, especially when we have users that are not directly related to the field of evacuation model, because sometimes we have users that are using this model just for some spot work, and consequently the fact that we have good capabilities of this model, so they can be used in a broad range of scenarios, broad range of works, different works. We have to tackle this problem and see what is the relation between the experience of users and their knowledge about the evacuation models themselves and the results they will produce. So we have more users, but this does not mean that this user will be expert enough. So my question was, what do we actually know about the default settings of embedded data? So if you are an evacuation modeler, the first thing you have to think is what you know about the model itself. and then you can focus on what the model can do. After this afternoon, I will also show another presentation in which I will describe the whole evacuation modeling community, so you can have also a picture on what are the current users of model, and you will see that you have a huge part of modelers that are very new in the field. So we are at least like 4 different points about default settings and embedded datasets. The first one is transparency, because we know that we have different kind of models that can be open source, closed source, and sometimes models have not the direct the information about the default settings is not directly available for them. So if you have closed source models, sometimes it's possible that you don't exactly know how the model works for modeling some specific problem. And also, if this is also related to the complexity of user interfaces, because if you have text-based or window-based, you have different degrees of control on the operation model input configuration, but sometimes you can have too much control. For example, if you are a non-expert user and you are able to change everything in the model, but you're not doing maybe something correct, or maybe you are not enough control like you want. For example, an expert user wants to have full control over a lot of parameters, but if you have a closed source model, sometimes you can't change something. So, and the last point is the field of applicability of these models, because sometimes you have some default settings or embedded datasets that were thought for specific kind of environments, but you're applying them for other different kind of scenarios. So you have to think how this will be, what will be the consequence on the result you will get. So here there is a quick description of the type of default settings. So we divided in 3 categories. Actually, Steve and Enrico divided this in 3 different type of settings. The first one is no default settings at all. So we need to configure the input before running the simulation, the whole input. And this is needing a lot of expertise by the users for know how to configure the model input settings. The second one is just a single factor setting. So you use by default a data set that sometimes, if you're not an expert user, maybe you don't really know what kind of default setting you're using. This is very dangerous when you are getting results, because you are getting something and you don't know why you are getting this. And the last category is when you have predefined list of settings or libraries, and you have to choose, and this is something in the middle, because you have to choose the proper one. So you need some expertise to choose what could be the proper settings, but at the same time you have not the full control of what you want to simulate, because if you want to introduce a new data set, you cannot. For example, I make this example. Now in Lund, we are collecting new information about the correlation between visibility condition and walkie speeds, and with models B and C, I cannot test the results I'm getting from these new experiments. But with models of type A, I can test this